and welcome to this edition of the Beacon Hill Report. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and in studio today, second show of the new year, second show of the legislative session. Chris Hendricks is joining us.
Pleasure to be here, Jim, as always.
Thanks for coming in. Lots going on for you right now. The session just getting underway, a few weeks ago, really, when you really think about it. First of all, new session for you. What does that mean? I mean, you've got committee assignments that'll come out.
The committee assignments came out yesterday.
Okay.
Yep. And so we didn't talk about that in our pre-interview.
Yeah.
But so steering, policy, and scheduling, I'm the vice chair of.
Okay.
And that is a committee, as I'm sure you know, that works closely with House Ways and Means and the Speaker's office about teeing up legislation, scheduling which bills should come to the House floor for a vote. So I'm unbelievably excited to be on that committee as a vice chair. I'm working with Representative Kevin Honan, who's the chairman of that committee, and he's been there for several terms. I worked with him when he was chair of housing. When I first came in, I was on housing, which I'm not anymore. So I'm vice chair of steering, policy, and scheduling. Again, they work closely with the Speaker's office, and we kind of get a picture of what is the most pressing to be voted upon as it relates to one bill over the other, and we also look for other ways, non-legislative things, to get things accomplished in the interim when we're not voting on legislation. So it's a committee that has 30,000-foot view on things, I think. So it's going to be interesting to have get that work under my belt and get to experience that. So it's going to be. I'm excited about that.
Any other committee assignments?
I'm on transportation, which is chaired by Jim Arciero, who I also worked with. He was the chair of housing who replaced Honan. So I worked with him on housing as well. I get to have a great relationship with him.
Which is interesting. I mean, Rep. Strauss, who just retired as the chairman, now it's
that was a big hole left there.
Another local rep being on that committee.
Yeah, well, he's not a local rep, but he is.
No, I mean you.
Being on the committee, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's going to be, I was very excited, especially with South Coast Rail, to have that.
The bridge is...
the bridge, all the construction, everything related to transportation. And that's obviously been a big issue for the last, handful of years. And with the Fair Share Amendment and all the money we're getting, everything we're doing on the South Coast here with transportation. So it is a great thing to have. I'm very pleased with that. But Jim Arciero, the chair, has strong ties down here. So he's going to be aware of what we're doing here. So we're going to have a strong ally with him, I think. I'm also on community development economic development. And the chair of that is Carol Fiola out of Fall River, so another South Coast connection there. So I'm excited.
So you got new committees all the way through.
Community development as well, which is by Vargas as a member. But yeah, I'm excited. And as you know, we just put through, speaking of the new early session, we put in some pretty big rules changes yesterday, or 2 days ago, in the House chamber. And these rules are in response to some of the transparency issues, concerns that have been cropping up over the last couple of years.
Well, you got the auditor looking to do an audit of the legislature.
The auditor, which I think that's been the catalyst of a lot of this. And I was quoted in the paper, or MB Light, a couple of days ago about kind of being skeptical about the transparency issue. And certainly I'm for more transparency across the board, any way we can get it. But I was making the point that a lot of the transparency issues that we've heard have come directly from the media. Other than the ballot question, I hear very little from my constituents, if at all, about House rules, transparency things therein. But even still, I'm glad that we put those measures in. While we're on the committees.
I think just the devil's advocate, from what I hear, isn't so much the transparency, is that a lot of decisions are made behind closed doors.
Right.
And that there's no debate on them. There's no public input in a sense. It's just, this is what we're going to do. And I think that's, at least from what I hear, that's the frustration.
There are certain processes that just happen with discussion, as one legislator to another, with the budget process, with the amendments process. But that's all viewable on television or in the House chamber. That's not. Is there a consolidated amendment process where we don't actually debate each amendment on the House floor, but those are being advocated for your rep or your senator. But the committee, there seemed to be a lot of focus on the committee process with the transparency issue, on how we take votes in the committee, on how attendance, isn't posted. So now, as of 2 days ago, when we passed this rules package, attendance will be posted for each committee. I was on Judiciary for the last 3 terms, so
Yes.
it's one of the busiest committees. So I made it a point in my work as a legislator to go to every single committee on the Judiciary. But now attendance will be taken and posted, and the committee votes will be public, which is one of the biggest gripes that the auditor had with the committee process, is how votes happen. So when it comes to the legislative process through the committee side, the transparency is going to be it's going to be there to stay. And I think members can no longer attend committees virtually. We have to show up in person. Again, that's something I always tried to do. It was good having the virtual option, but if you look at it from the other side, if you're someone who's coming in from Western Mass to testify on something that's really important to you, and you go to the committee and there's empty seats with a bunch of faces on a screen next to you, it doesn't give you that advocacy feel and that.
The delegation during COVID was saying one of the main issues that they had was that you don't get the face-to-face meeting with your colleagues. Legislation slowed
that
because
was the toughest thing.
Because you can be walking down a hall, as I know, and you can be working with a counterpart on something to, let's get this bill going, or let's do this, and then you get other people. It's the conversations, the one-on-ones.
It's vital.
And the staff one-on-ones are vital.
Yeah. So just learn people's names, and because I know that guy now. Next week, I'll know where to go.
Yeah.
You couldn't be more right, and that's so important. And so I'm glad that the House rules have kind of fostering an era of getting back to that as much as we can. The virtual option will still be available for people testifying. So that's obviously was something we wanted to maintain. But as far as legislators, we'll have to be, and I'm no longer on Judiciary, because of my, the vice chairmanship and my other committees. But I think it was good timing that I left Judiciary at the time where attendance. That was a busy committee. We did tons of work in the last 3 sessions. We tackled guns, we tackled reproductive rights, we tackled police reform, like 3 of the most politically charged topics you can tackle in the Judiciary. So I'm really proud of the work I did on the Judiciary the last 3 terms.
Do you find that legislatures are receptive to being in person? Because again, you've had this stretch where you could be remote.
Yeah, well, we've had to be in person for formals.
Correct.
I think people are itching to get back to more normalcy, and not that things aren't pretty stable now, but certainly vestiges of COVID have still remained, and so I think kind of shaking those off and getting back into the building as much as possible. Again, it's not that bad of a drive for me, so I'm up there as much as I can. But people who are 2.5 hours, 2.5 hours out, it's tough, and so that a lot of that virtual stuff helped.
But again, that's what you get into when you.
Oh yeah. And this stipend for that. So I mean, it's I don't have that much sympathy for him, but I think. So I just think it's good that we'll all be back in the building more.
So what do you look at as your priorities right now for this session? What are the 2 or 3 things that you want to try to accomplish?
The priorities, first off, before we even put through the House rules, we had a lot of legislative things to get through, namely the supplemental budget. So the migrant humanitarian crisis that we're dealing with is still going to be an issue. We walk and chew gum at the same time, of course, but this is going to be something that we're not just going to be able to, put a supplemental budget, and then walk away from, just like we did last year. It's not, it's something that's going to demand our attention. It wasn't great that we had to put $425 million extra dollars into the shelter system.
Well, it seems as though that's what the legislature's looking at. That's it for this fiscal year.
That, as far as we know, there's been no more asks. It's all through the governor's office. Yeah. So, and it's the governor's branch that has to run the shelter system.
And it's $1 billion for the year too.
$1 billion. That's a lot of money. When normally it was 100, 200 million in a normal year. So it's a lot of money. It's not something that we were happy to put through, but when you look at the other option, I'm getting a lot of calls saying, "Why'd you, vote on this?" It was a tough vote, and it certainly was. But if we voted no, okay, say I voted no, and everyone else voted no, and it didn't pass, 7,000 families go out on the street the next day, and instead of being in a shelter system, instead of being in a state-controlled environment, we'll have homeless families out on the street in the gateway cities. They're not going to go to Acushnet or Dartmouth or Fairhaven. They're going to come to New Bedford, Fall River, and the like. So, the result, if we didn't act, would have been catastrophic. And you think it's bad now? Just wait. When all those thousands of families, 7,000 are on the street, panhandling and trying to make do in the streets and on our lawns and on our, it would have been chaos.
And you're capping it next year too. It's going from
we did some huge
7,500 to 4,000 for 2026.
That's the goal.
That's almost half.
By calendar year 2026, we want to have no more than 4,000 families in there. That's about 6,000 to 7,000 families there now. And so that's a goal that we need to work towards, that the administration needs to work towards. We also put in, the last time we put money into this system through a supplemental budget, we put restrictions on that at that time as well. At that time we put 9 months. And if you remember, the Republicans at the time were itching for 6 months, which we did this time around. And of course, they still didn't vote for it. But I get it. It's a very charged political topic, but at the end of the day, inaction would have made this unbelievably worse. And the idea that we're inviting folks to come here and that we're encouraging people to come here is absolutely, utterly false. Okay, this is a humanitarian crisis where we have people, just look at the bus station downtown. Just imagine how much worse that would have been had we not continued to fund the shelter system. And we don't have any emergency family sheltering in New Bedford, by the way. We have some families that are being placed, but we do not have any large-scale motels being rented out in our area, thank God. But that, without any more extra money, that would have looked a lot different.
And you got about, according to the figures that I saw, about 2,200 families still in hotels and motels right now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Not shelters, but just in the hotels and motels.
Yeah. It's a strained system, and you have a lot of criticism going towards the governor about the prices she's paying out, per week, per month for hotels, and so hopefully the restraints we put in.
But again, you get the new administration. The new administration federally that just took over is they're looking to, if you're an illegal migrant, you're basically should be prepared to go.
Well, I'm not prepared to act on anything from the government yet. We're hearing a lot of things. We don't really. We hear ICE has had some presence in New Bedford. Listen, if they're going after criminals with criminal records, great. They should have been doing that, before, during, and after Trump. But if they start kicking doors in at churches, they start kicking doors in at food processing plants on the waterfront, then we get a problem. And so I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that whatever that deportation process looks like is humane, and it treats our folks with respect, because everyone who's here is here legally through, if they're in the shelter system, because now we put in a restriction that you have to prove residency, and that can be someone seeking asylum, but that's one of the restrictions we put in place, one of the limitations we put in place on this system. Look, it's a state-run process, and just like any state-run process, whether it be education, workforce development, healthcare, it has to be sustainable. So if it's not sustainable, it's going to fail. So hopefully this will continue to make it sustainable, and then we won't have to put so much money. I mean, the revenue issue has helped us. Like last year, it was a lot more difficult of a vote when we're talking about 9C cuts and we're talking about revenues that are just way down. This year, whole different outlook. Revenues are way up. And so we're expecting that this issue is, as time is, will continue to alleviate and lessen over time.
One of the other things that people are really talking about, and you were talking about it off air moments ago, is that energy prices right now. Not that the legislature has control over that. It's the Department of Public Utilities that deals with that, and the board there, they set the rates. They're up 10 to 30%, or they called for a 10 to 30% raise depending on who it was last fall. And I know, you're a homeowner.
I rent, but I still pay those bills. I still pay those bills.
You got a shock, but what can the legislature, I know the governor has said we need to look at it. Looking at it is great, but ultimately it is the DPU that sort of makes that call.
The DPU, as you said, approves or denies all requests from the utilities about rate changes. They just decided that over the next, and Eversource as well, and all the utility companies has decided over the next 2 months it's going to be a 10% reduction in rates. They have been leaning on to raise rates. They've been leaning on the fact that inflation, price of doing business is higher, interest rates, but that's not really correlating to. And they also saying that the Mass Save program is causing all this. DPU, in my opinion, has become a rubber stamp for these utility companies. And I think where we can tackle this issue is, going after DPU and making sure they do the right thing, because it's unacceptable. We've written, many letters to DPU, to the AG's office, telling her to look at DPU and how they approve these rates. We can't have them be a rubber stamp. For the next 2 months, you've got.
Didn't mean to interrupt. You've got so many people in your district on fixed costs. And,
and
where are they getting that money?
You got a bill that's 30%, 40%, 50% higher than it was. That could bury you. And believe me, I'm very aware of that. And so the next 2 months, they should see a decline in your utilities bill. The question is that going to be sustained? Because they're always going to be, because we had a cold winter. That didn't help.
Correct.
The colder the winter, they lean into the fact that they can raise the rates. And sometimes that might be necessary, but you have a real problem when you have DPU just rubber stamping a process that the utility companies want based on information that really isn't. To say it's the Mass Save program in our focus on renewable energy, we put in a green energy bill that mandated that the utilities upgrade, modernize the grid, and they're leaning on to that, saying that we have to raise the rates because of all those mandates. But that has to be done anyway, whether we're doing renewable energy or not. You have to update the grid.
Well, a lot of things too is
for more capacity.
Is the service charge is astronomical.
The delivery,
the delivery charge, correct? I call it a service charge, but you're right. Delivery charge. And what is that? I mean, does that? I know what it, but does that change every year? The delivery? It's the same delivery.
I mean, that's they lean on that so they can keep their doors open, and so they want to they petition DPU to raise those rates based on information that is suspect, in my opinion. And so, so when the winter is really harsh, you're going to have these issues, and hopefully, a month, because last year we dealt with it as well, not as bad as this year. And I'm hoping once the temperature goes down a little, goes up a little bit, that a lot of these problems will go away. But when it's a harsh winter, and if there's a lot of avenues for them to make the case that they should have higher rates, they'll make it. But the problem is DPU has to stop being a rubber stamp for that process.
And who, in a sense, I don't want to say control is not the right word, but oversees the DPU? It's just the governor, really.
Right. It's in the governor's.
It's not the legislature.
It's not the legislature, but certainly we have, we provide oversight, and I'm hoping that we can get to the bottom of it. I'm sure there's going to be some committee hearings coming up talking about this stuff, so there'll be more information and more avenues to kind of address this problem, I think, over the next coming weeks. We're having well, the city is having I think it's Leo Chiquette, Council Leo Chiquette is having on March 24th or 25th, I'm not sure about that, in the North End. At Pulaski, I believe, on this issue, and the utility companies will be there to speak to this. DPU has been asked, and I don't think they're the people who really should be there, because Eversource, all the other, National Grid, the other utility companies, they're just going to say that we asked DPU and they grant it. So, but that's unacceptable.
The other thing
we have
too,
to change that.
The other thing too, interestingly too, I mean, the summers are getting warmer. So with air conditioning and other stuff, your costs, it's going to be sure less, but it's still, they're going to be higher than they used to be in that period of time.
And so we have to make sure that this is nipped in the bud, because this isn't going to go away with the extremes in weather.
A couple other things. Time is flying by here, though, first and foremost. Commuter rail, March 24th is the first
March 24th is a big day, apparently.
And I remember the last time you were here, you said you were on a test run or whatever for the train.
Yes. So first off, the anticipated date for passenger service was like early summer. Up until a couple of weeks ago when they announced that it's actually going to be coming in late March, which is unbelievable considering all the pushback, all the negative stuff we had about timing for so long. And so, passenger service is going to start. It's going to be the same pay scale as the Middleborough zone, so they're not adding an extra zone where you're going to be, if you take the train in Middleborough, it's going to be the same price as if you take the train from New Bedford. It's going to be about $12.20 or will be $12.25 round trip from New Bedford. And for the first month or so, weekend service they came out with an announcement 2 days ago saying that weekend service will be free, and parking will be free on the weekends as well at all MBTA trains, commuter rail stations.
How optimistic are you of people using the train, the commuter rail?
It's going to be an investment
because it hasn't been around. People are used to driving.
It's a new thing. People are going to. You're changing the dynamic,
right?
And it's not going to happen overnight.
I know they've studied it, and they're optimistic. But are you, when you've seen that and talked to people, are you optimistic that eventually this is going to be not a cost, not a black hole money wise,
like a white elephant, as they say. I am confident that the ridership will be where it needs to be at some point soon. Will it be where it needs to be in the first year or so? Probably not, but that's encouraging people to ride it, making it easier and more convenient for people to ride it, I think should always be our focus. But it's a long-term investment, and we're gonna, right off the bat,
the buses were always packed, and now the buses are gone too, so people have had to adjust to that. I know you guys, as a delegation, sort of negotiated to get a bus or two up, but it's not like the schedule used to be.
Right.
So that's something that people have had to adjust to.
When that bus line went down, because Peter Pan's doing it now, it was DATCO. When DATCO, cleaned their hands of it, there was a lot of people up in arms about that. There is a demand. You drive on 140. If you were driving to Boston during peak hours, going to Boston on 140 in the morning, it wouldn't be that much traffic. It's a pretty easy going highway. Now it's almost a full highway when you're going on 140. And so I anticipate there's still a lot of people driving to Boston, and I think that having two locations in New Bedford, that will only encourage people to use it. And we have plenty of parking. The parking in the North End is huge. I think there's like 300 or so parking spots. So there's enough capacity. But I think, it's going to be a mental thing. People aren't going to think to use a train right away. So it's going to happen gradually. But I think there's enough effort for us to push it and make sure it's successful.
Another thing that sort of a transportation issue when you think about it with your new committee assignment, State Pier. What's the update on that right now?
So we're still waiting on Mass Development to make a decision on the bids. As you know, there's multiple parties who put in bids to do multiple things: restaurant, workforce training, storage, the base auction, the fishing.
It's a lot there.
Fishing industry things. There's tons of ideas.
But you
cruise ships.
But the delegation was adamant too that they wanted. Obviously, it's a fishing pier.
Yes. So it's going to be multi-use,
Yep.
and so we wanted to make sure that that is still used for maritime uses, fishing, either offshore wind, fishing, whatever the case may be. And then the 20% of the westernmost part of the pier, if you're looking at it, will be developed, for retail and the like. So, and we're hoping that a restaurant, this Silverstein put in a bid to have a restaurant there. So we're hoping that the state can fit in, a restaurant to go, because having a restaurant, having a nice archway, some retail, and then behind that have a nice working waterfront, it'd be really cool. It's going to be the highlight of downtown, where I suggested that, if you're going down Route 18, you should be able to see a nice archway into the beautiful State Pier. And so hopefully we'll have something, design-wise that will be appealing.
Do you have an estimate on the project, though? Obviously I know that you've got to make a decision on that, but when things happen, is this 5 years down the road, or?
I would say there's going to be a lot of work done because the utilities are going to have to be put through the pier. And right now, there's a serious issue about getting utility lines in there. So that's going to be plumbing and the like. So that's going to be the biggest challenge.
And I don't think I've ever heard that either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so there's going to be a lot of work being done.
Because you guys have talked about this for a
lot of
long time. The mayor has talked about this for a long time. You guys have wanted to do something with State
Oh yeah,
for a long
they've been
time.
working on this long before, as you know, long before Mark Montigny, and it has been, this is his. He knows a lot about this stuff, and he's been working on it for a long time, as well as the guys in the delegation. But it's going to be a few years, I think. Hopefully, no more than a couple once construction starts.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really depends on what they choose to do, because that's all in Mass Development's hands about what can go. We made our position clear on what we want, so we're not anticipating any major surprises. But the Ernestina has to stay there.
Yep.
That's a spot. The police presence on the northern side of the pier will be there still, either there or somewhere on the pier.
Right.
So it's going to be, it's a great opportunity.
Do you hope that the Mass Development will make some sort of recommendation or decision this year?
Oh yeah, we anticipate it's going to be pretty soon. I haven't got a hard, potential timeline for it yet, but and I know Mass Development recently changed, CEOs and heads over there, so they went through a little transition periods, but they've kept us abreast along the way with their interim person, and so we anticipate that they're going to make a good decision for New Bedford, and we hope they will.
That's going to do it. This half hour has flown by.
It
Lots
has.
of stuff. So we thank you for coming in as always. State Representative Chris Hendricks, our guest. We will see you in a couple of months. I don't know when, because we've got new reps too.
Well,
so.
we're going to I'll get those guys in here. We'll
get
make
them
sure they're
in.
here.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Beacon Hill Report. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.